subscribers. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. We are brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation, which you can find on Facebook, Jackie Richardson, Alex Ramos. Make sure you check them out. They do some great things for retired and former boxers. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I am doing really, really good. Always excited to talk boxing with you guys. Let's get it going.
All right, and another man who is always pumped up, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good, Mike. I'm especially pumped up after we got a surprisingly chock full of action last Saturday, which leaves us a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there was a couple really good heavyweight fights. We had another heavyweight fight that wasn't that good, but at least the man that was supposed to get business taken care of did take care of it. And let's start off with that. We had Luis Ortiz knocked out Razvan Kajana. I know I'm not saying that right, but we're never going to have to say that name again, so I don't care. Knocked him out in the second round. I don't think this was any big test for him, John, but as I just said, Ortiz did go out and do what he was supposed to do, which a lot of these heavyweights don't do nowadays.
Yeah, he did, Mike. And in any fight where, we have an expected winner, I do use the test that you brought up. Is at least then, if somebody can take care of business impressively, I give them some points. I don't give them the points that they would get for a win against an opponent who's more of a threat. But I do give them some points if they take care of business impressively, and I give them no points if they don't. So I think Ortiz took care of business impressively, but I think you're wishful thinking when you say you're never going to have to say Kajanu's name again, because he'll probably turn up as cannon fodder for somebody else.
No, because
down
since
the
I
line.
said that, no matter who he fights, I'm never going to bring it up.
But I did like the way, with the knockout being more specific, I was impressed the way Ortiz landed a big right hook and then finished it out with that booming straight left that he's already showed a lot of times. Usually he's straight 1-2 with that right jab and then that booming straight left hand, but he landed a really nice right hook before the big left, and Kajano did the Trevor Berbick thing against Mike Tyson, where he went down 3 times from one bomb, and that's an impressive knockout. And it got me thinking, again, with some of the opponents even not being as good, you look at Ortiz's last 3 fights. He knocked out a complete no-hoper with a bomb, and then he hurt Wilder badly, and then he got rid of Kajanu impressively in 2 rounds with a huge shot. So the point is, at 39, he is still showing the power, which makes him interesting, and he certainly performed well enough that even though we had a couple other great heavyweight fights over the weekend, which we're going to talk about, it's certainly not a stretch to say Luis Ortiz could take those other 4 guys potentially that were
John,
involved.
I think it's a big stretch to think he's only 39 years old.
I think that's at least what evidence we have. But
hey, it doesn't matter. Whatever. It doesn't matter because he's still one of the top 5 heavyweights, no matter whether he's 60 or 20.
And he's bringing the power. And that's the thing. What I didn't like about him and Povetkin is the both of them had 2 positive PED tests. But if we're going to rank these guys and they're not going to be under suspension, they are 2 of the top 5 heavyweights in the world, and they do bring power. So in that sense, they bring some interest to the division.
All right, so Jeremiah, what's your take on Ortiz? And I agree with John. I mean, I think this. I said this a couple weeks ago. I think that we're going to see Luis Ortiz against Deontay Wilder. I think we're going to see it April or May. I don't think we're going to see Wilder and Joshua. We'll get to that in a little bit, but the way this is setting up, it's working out great for both guys, so they don't have to fight each other for a while.
Well, I mean, I can tell you it's working pretty well for Eddie Hearn right now. I mean,
Yeah, he's raking.
That's a guy who's going to make a significant amount of money here in the near future. But I don't know. The negotiations and whatnot, seem to be all over the place. I'm not sure what's going to be set in stone. I mean, I was just reading on the news before I got on about how Eddie Hearn said he was going to make a big offer to Deontay Wilder for a Dillian White clash, and I suppose that might be, and that's for the fall. That's as opposed to Wilder fighting Dominic Breazeale. So yeah, it seems to be a lot going for him at the moment, especially at heavyweights. But in regards to Luis Ortiz, I mean, he's obviously a player still. I mean, he's got that typical Cuban style, but it's been adapted because of his size. He lulls you to sleep with that lead hand. He paws at you a lot of times to kind of, again, he lulls you to sleep, and he does a good job of parrying your lead hand, and then he bangs you with a straight left like a lot of Cuban fighters are well known for. But whether he's 39 or 46, it doesn't matter. I mean, he's a big time player right now, and I just hope they pair him with somebody, that makes it interesting for him. I mean, because I think there are a number of guys, skill-wise, Ortiz is still one of the very best. I mean, he's definitely a top 5 in terms of skill set, but again, because of his age and whatnot, I think you could pair him with a number of guys and make things interesting. I'm not quite sure he gets a Wilder rematch. I don't think that makes... I mean, it makes some financial sense, but again, if you're Eddie Hearn,
dangerous.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, if you're Eddie Hearn, I mean, you can, and I think which makes more promotional sense is pairing him, Deontay Wilder with a guy like Dillian White, because Wilder and Joshua are going to fight each other one day. I mean, you can't keep putting this off. So I think, you pair him with a British heavyweight, and it just makes, again, it just builds it better. You start to bring Deontay Wilder into the British masses, and his name becomes familiarized there. But I'm hoping still that we get the Joshua Wilder clash early next year. But yeah, Ortiz is a player. I just, I think he's a PBC guy, so I'm trying to think of who you – maybe he could get Dominic Breazeale in the meantime. I suppose that's possible. It's a winnable fight. I'm trying to think of the guys he could be matched with, besides Wilder. And I don't know. I guess Breazeale might be in the future. I don't know.
All right.
I think he might – I think that Wilder rematch might be on the radar screen. When you really – I think Hearn – my opinion, may be a little bit different than – Jeremiah and Mike, in that I just don't think Hearn wants Joshua Wilder. I'm getting real pessimistic about that.
I don't think he does either. I don't disagree with that, John. And I think this, though, if you're Eddie Hearn, your job is to make money, and he's doing it.
Well, he is, but I think if you look at the business part too, and this would be frankly because there's American money potentially involved in Vegas and things like that. Where the site fees are higher, that they make more money on that, whether you like it or not, they make more money than the UK gate. Hearn himself has actually admitted that in a moment of candor, which in the last month or so. But my point is this, if you really are looking at maximizing Joshua Wilder, contrary to popular belief, what would be needed is Joshua fighting in the United States against somebody of note, not Wilder getting more known. He draws terrible numbers in the U.S. He's not bringing the pay-per-view numbers he needs to in the U.S. And that would even build the fight more. So, in the U.K., if Wilder is going to fight Joshua in the UK, there's going to be more than enough interest over there in that, just with Joshua being in it with Wilder. You don't need Wilder to get more known over there, but you do need Joshua to get more known over here for American pay-per-view numbers, which, again, still generates the most revenue. But, Hearn is making a lot of money, like Mike said, in the UK. He's making a lot of money for Joshua, too. There's no doubt about that. And I just think he wants to keep rolling that gravy train as long as he possibly can.
Yeah, real quick. So Eddie Hearn said, I think it was today, that he'd like to pair Dillian White with Wilder in New York City. I think it would be good promotion. It'd be a good promotion all around if he had, Deontay Wilder versus Dillian White on the undercard, and then just throw an American in with Joshua. I mean, that would be cool to see, and it'd be a good way to build it. And you would definitely think they're all serious then. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to get some cross pollination there before they actually duke it out.
Yeah, but
let's challenge her. Let's challenge her. And how's Hearn going to pay Deontay Wilder $8 million, which is what he said today, to fight in the United States against Dillian White? I mean, that doesn't make it really. It doesn't even make any sense. I agree with some of the commentators who said that Hearn is afraid that Fury might be serious about fighting Wilder, and that's gonna maybe derail a little of the momentum with his UK attention gravy train with Joshua, and he wants to stir the pot to get anything to take attention off of that.
What if you bring Fury to the States to fight him? Because Fury is going to say stuff and do stuff that's going to get attention.
Well, and that's what they're talking about. Apparently, that's not a joke. That there's some rumor that Warren might be serious about letting Fury do it, and Fury's got to have his own cash out sooner or later. Maybe he thinks he's got a chance to beat Wilder. The odds makers would certainly have him in there. I saw one of the UK bookmaker guys today said in the theoretical, Fury Wilder fight, in the UK, that Wilder would be a very slight favorite. So
yeah, but all those
I don't know who knows
off of the Fury that they saw 3 years ago too. If you saw Fury fight a couple months ago or a month ago, it's going to take a while for him to get even near what he used to be, even if he possibly can.
Yeah, I mean that's a fact. And personally, I don't even think the Fury of 3 years ago beats Wilder because he doesn't have the offense.
Come on, they both suck. Anything's possible when two guys suck. Sorry, John. But I still think in the end, the biggest deficiency here, why this fight's not being made, is how poorly Wilder's entire career has been managed. I mean, you got a guy that can knock a dude out with one shot and has done that relatively most of his fights, and he doesn't get any more buzz than what he gets. I mean, if you look, if the guys taking care of Deontay Wilder would have been running Mike Tyson wouldn't have got a title shot till 1993.
Mike, I blame that on the state of U.S. boxing right now. I don't blame that on Wilder and Heyman and PBC. I do find it sad. I mean, I'm in agreement. But I personally just blame that more on the state of where boxing is in the U.S. I think it's a shame, but
yeah, but I think one of the reasons boxing is that way in the U.S., John, is I don't think anybody promotes anybody that's an American properly anymore.
Well, but look, at least PBC, it wasn't the matchup we would have wanted, but again, nobody had even tried things like this for decades. They got Wilder on network TV against Duhapa. So they got him a network appearance, and it's just, you look at it's. But here's what I would say: the part of the problem with American boxing is this, that I would agree with you, is it's that whole U.S. system with fights being on premium cable. Because I think if you stick with it with Wilder and some of his better matchups on Showtime, for example, what if Wilder Ortiz would have been on CBS at 8 o'clock, paired with another good fight on the undercard? That's going to start building Deontay Wilder. So I do think that, there still are some avenues that could be utilized that just aren't in American boxing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they could have built him into what Mike Tyson was, but, the Mike Tyson with the videotapes and everything hadn't been done that often. Sometimes you got to think outside of the box to promote something. We talked about Dillian White a little bit. Dillian White beats Joseph Parker, close 12-round unanimous decision. I'll start off with Jeremiah on this one. Jeremiah, what's your take on Dillian White? Do you have more respect for his ability after this, or is it the same? I mean, me and John kind of talked about it. It looked like the same Joseph Parker to us. It was just Dillian White actually went after him, where Anthony Joshua didn't.
Yeah, I think that is a difference. Well, I do chalk it up to Dillian White's ability. I do think he's improving. I mean, his technique is still rough. I mean, his right hand is, oh man. It is not pretty. I mean, there's a lot of slack on it. It's got some strength behind it, but then again, the guys, when you're that big, it should have some steam behind it. But I do think it was his approach and his ability. He actually, to me, I follow him on social media and whatnot. He looks as if he takes this seriously. Even when he's not in training camp, he looks like he's eating right. He looks like he's still training at least somewhat. So I think he's owning his craft. I mean, I don't think he had a real long amateur background, and that might be, a big contribution to his technique. But I think that he's honing his craft. I think he's working hard and he's making the most out of what he's got. And I got to give the guy a lot of credit. I mean, because Joseph Parker did fight much the same way that he did against Anthony Joshua, but Joshua was, he was content fighting him from distance. And I actually think Dillian Whyte's stamina is better than Anthony Joshua's. I mean, he was able to throw, a good number of punches for the entire time, minus the 12 round. He was certainly huffing and puffing around, round 10, 11 and 12, especially 12. But I just think he's honing his craft. He's working hard. But it was his aggressive approach that made the fight what it was. Parker was, he was sticking, he was moving. I thought Parker did pretty well in the early rounds. He was waiting for Dillian Whyte to throw a jab, and then he would parry it and then throw his own, which was generally quicker and straighter. But Whyte kept pushing and he kept pressing, and the first knockdown really wasn't all that special. It was more of a flash. And in fact, I think it was a result of a headbutt when he saw the replay. So I didn't think much of that. But yeah, Parker was just he didn't really seem like he wanted to take it up a notch. And I do think the British commentators, really in both fights, the Takam fight as well, they were just they were dreadful to listen to at times because
they were awful.
It was terrible. I think around what was it, 7 or so. One of the commentators, I wasn't even really paying attention to the names. One of them was saying that Parker didn't look like he wanted to be there, et cetera, and he almost stops Whyte in the 12th round.
Right.
I don't think it's that Parker didn't want to be there. I think he just thought that he could do what he did to Joshua and be successful and outbox Dillian Whyte, because Whyte he felt was not quite on that level. So he's like, I had some success there. I'll be okay. But it was confusing after watching the fight, really, because Parker would have probably been better off being the aggressor because he was the sharper man. He was quicker. He obviously had enough power to hurt Whyte if he wanted to. But no, he let Whyte come forward. He let him land a good number of shots. He got lazy with his defense from time to time, and I mean, I was just surprised all around. It happened to be a good fight. I didn't think it was anything great, but it was a damn good fight, and you don't get much of that in the heavyweight division anymore. And I give a lot of credit to Whyte. I mean, for what he's got, he's been doing pretty damn well lately, and you just got to admit that he's one of the best heavyweights in the world. And of course, that's not saying much in today's division, but he's going out and he's getting it, and I appreciate it.
All right. Did we talk about Chisora and Takam yet?
No, that'll be next.
Okay. I thought I already talked about that. I meant to. John, I know you're one that thought Parker won the fight.
Yeah, I'm in a minority. There were some other people out there, but I know I'm in a minority on that.
I think Roberto Duran had him in it too.
In the LA Times.
There were a few others, but I did actually think I actually saw the fight quite a bit like Jeremiah. I never thought I'd be saying it in a million years, but I did think it was a great fight. There was plenty of excitement there, which was a surprise. But what I see that Jeremiah saw, and I agree, and Mike, you and I have talked about it a little bit yesterday, off the air. Dillian Whyte, and I thought it was a bit like, different styles of fights and things, but it was a little bit like what I credited Munguia for. The guys today are not good at cutting off the ring. Like, there just aren't Joe Frazier's out there. So I'm already used to, after decades, not expecting the guys today to be able to cut off the ring, and they can't. But what they can do when they don't have that skill is like what Munguia and like what Whyte did. And even though he was up against, a more skilled boxer. You know, it's what Gassiev just didn't do against Usyk, which is, you know, even if you can't cut off the ring on a guy that's a better boxer than you keep after him. You're swinging even if it's a little bit wild, taking the risks you need to. And over the course of 12 rounds, you're putting on physical and mental pressure. And when a fighter has to continually back off, it takes more energy out of you to back off than moving forward. Anybody that's been involved in any kind of athletics, and of course, including boxing, knows that. And if you keep with that, and the guy doesn't hit you with something enough to hurt you and get you out of there, you're going to start wearing down the opponent. And that's what usually, a lot of times people go to the intangibles too much, but that I do agree with that assessment on White in this fight where he wanted it. But I agree with Jeremiah. I think all of us, Mike, Jeremiah, myself, we've evaluated Parker correctly for a long while now. And, you know, we're not saying in hindsight, we've said it on this show repeatedly. You know, the guy's a mediocre boxer, and that's his strength. You know, he puts the jab out there. And that's what he was again, but White was putting the pressure on him. In other words, I think all three of us agree, you know, it wasn't that Parker didn't want it like Jeremiah said, or like some of the people were saying after the fight, or the commentators, or he'd regressed and gotten soft. I saw people out there on Twitter saying he got lazy after the Joshua fight because he made money. Now, this was the same Joseph Parker, like Jeremiah said. If anything, he showed more heart than he's been showing when he went after White in the 12th round and tried to take him out. The thing I disagree with Jeremiah a little bit, though, is when Joe Parker has moved up, he does not have the power. He went after White. He showed heart. It was more of an accumulation from when he was banging White, you know, with 1-2s repeatedly throughout the 12 rounds, and White finally wore down at the end. He wore down also himself, and you know, he was exhausted, and I do agree with the assessments that a lot of times it's an exaggeration. I don't think it was here. If that fight went 15 seconds longer, Dillian White was out of there. I don't think there's much doubt about that. But it was very exciting. The first knockdown on Parker was a headbutt. I still gave the 10-8 because the ref scored it that way, but I just thought, you know, Parker was landing on White more, and White, as Jeremiah said, was just swinging wildly. I mean, he made Deontay Wilder look like Sugar Ray Robinson. I mean, people make fun of Deontay Wilder when he gets a guy hurt and starts windmilling. He looked like Sugar Ray Robinson compared to White, who was just swinging wildly from way outside and swinging and missing, but he kept the pressure on, and that got Parker worn down. It became kind of a war of attrition, which Parker almost won at the end, but he didn't, and that provided a lot of excitement. I want to give White credit that Jeremiah alluded to, too. You know, he's very, very crude, but he does seem to be getting his weight behind his shots a little more, because that second knockdown of Parker was a bomb. And it was really just like the shot he took Lucas Brown out with. And I give Parker some credit even from getting up from that one. But you know, White's been coming in heavier and heavier, and even though he put pressure on, you know, he's just heavy, and he's just getting enough behind it that he can hurt you now. But you know, I agree too. He the way the heavyweight division is, and you know, he got the win on the cards, and just because of what I thought, that doesn't overrule it. You know, White has moved himself up in the division. He's, you know, completely solidified his status in the top 10, and you know, we see where he goes from here.
All right, also Derek Chisora, who is like a bad sexually transmitted disease, reared his ugly head again, beats Carlos Takam, stops him in the 8th round. I really don't want to spend that much time on this fight, but it was a good fight between two guys that I think have seen their better days, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I actually had more fun watching this fight than I had watching the Parker White fight. The reason being is because it was fought at close quarters. I mean, I thought that's one thing that's really lacking in today's heavyweight division is just about nobody has an inside game. I mean, everybody's working from the outside, and you know, it's a lot of jabbing, a lot of grabbing. It's not all that appealing. But no, Takam was. They reminded me of you know, a crafty heavyweight. You know, he's sort of slick in there. I mean, you know, Joshua. Funny enough, Joshua couldn't get Takam out of there, and he couldn't get Parker out of there. So I'm not quite sure how this reflects on Joshua, but it's well, I guess he did get Takam out of there technically, but you know, we know how that
would happen there.
Yeah. Yeah, but Takam he's a pretty crafty guy, and I actually had Takam win in every round except I think the fourth, going into the last round when he got stopped. I mean, in my opinion, Takam was the bully. He was landing more punches. He was the crisper fighter. I mean, it just seemed like things were going his way. And the British commentators, some of them, I think they had it a bit too close. That's just my take on it there. But it was a real fun fight. I mean, Chisora hung in there and he showed up. He was in shape, unlike I had heard. And he was fighting well off the ropes, and he took a bunch of punches cleanly and kept, hanging in there and giving out whatever he was getting. And, the end surprised me. Takam was pretty defensively responsible. I mean, he was getting caught with some clean shots in the round before. I think there was a succession of about 3 shots that he was hit with, but he wasn't teetering and tottering. But yeah, the right hand that clipped him, it was a little. It was surprising. I mean, I thought Takam would be better than that, and. Chisora, just like White, you got to give him a lot of credit for hanging in there. I mean, this is a guy who a lot of people think was done. He had some dull performances previous to this, and he clipped him with the right hand, and then when he got up, knocked him out with the next right hand that he threw, and it was a really nice punch. And now Chisora he's I mean, really both the guys. I'd actually like to see a rematch because I thought it was good enough to warrant that. But now, Takam, Chisora, White, now they can hopefully go collect a big payday somewhere else. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Dillian White versus Chisora, the rematch, because that was very close. I'm not sure, Hearn or whomever would like to see that, but I thought it was a damn good fight. I think it's the best heavyweight fight I've seen this year.
All right. I said keep it brief, and you didn't. John, can you keep it brief and talk about this fight?
Yeah, I got a lot of words out on the last one, so I'll try to keep this one brief. But I do want to credit it. I thought another great fight. I never thought I'd be saying it. I guess the one thing I got to give Eddie Hearn with this card is the British hadn't had as many pay-per-views, and now they're getting it. And this was pay-per-view over there. It wasn't even shown in the U.S., but I don't think I like to hear a pay-per-view getting started over there. I'd like them to kill it off because it killed boxing in the U.S., but along with the premium cable thing. But with that said, I think what I'm going to give Eddie Hearn credit with in these fights, and I didn't think they'd be anything like they were going in, but where he deserves credit is they were both even money fights, basically, with the odds makers going in. And when you put even money fights together, good things are much more likely to happen than when you have these mismatches, no-hoper fights, or fights where you got huge underdogs. So these were both even money going in. I thought they both ended up being great fights. I thought what kind of got Takam in this one is he's a 37-year-old guy, and he tried to fight a high-pressure fight. And when you're 37 years old, even at heavyweight, and you try to fight a high-pressure fight, usually you're not going to be able to sustain it. A high-pressure style, give and take like that's for a younger guy. And what happened was the round before, even though I'm with Jeremiah, I had Takam winning the fight comfortably, and he was landing a lot of good shots. But the round before, Chisora landed a lot of bombs right on the button. And it looked at that point like he couldn't hurt Takam. But then it turned out the next round, when he hit him with the same shots, Takam went out like a light. And I think that's where you get that accumulation where Takam's tiring, he's fighting a high-pressure fight, he's taking shots at 37 years old, and then the door opens up, and all of a sudden the shot that didn't affect him that much a couple of rounds before ends up hurting him. One hurts him, and then one right on the button ends it. Good heart by Chisora in that fight because he was taking a lot. And when he couldn't hurt Takam the round before, I thought he might give up, frankly. And that's where I want to give Derek Chisora some credit. Never been a particularly big fan of his, but he showed me some heart there because he didn't give up on things, kept firing away, and the door opened, and he ended it. And one thing, even though Takam fought a tough, exciting fight, I've never been that high on Takam. We know that on the show. And I do want to say, look at his career. He's never really beaten anybody. I mean, every time he fights anybody of note, he loses. So it was always a head scratcher for me that anybody had him as a top 10 heavyweight going into this fight, but some did. And, Chisora gets the big win there, puts him in the picture. This is the type of thing usually they'd be talking about I wouldn't like, but I think I do like this one. I'd just like to finish it with Eddie Hearn has, Jarrell Miller, obviously was able to work with Chisora for this fight. That fight might actually be pretty entertaining. I think that Miller would bludgeon him out of there, but I'd like to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that would be a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd
So
be awesome.
let's keep that one in mind as something that might work.
No, it won't. Come on. And you guys took way too long to answer those questions. I don't think Jarrell Miller even hits that hard, and Derek Chisora, I mean, come on. Let's go
Entertaining
ahead.
fight.
Yeah, well, two guys that are drunk at the bar would be too, but, well, hell, I guess I would want to see two guys drunk at the bar fight, so what the hell, I'll watch it. All right, next up we had Mikey Garcia, unified part of the lightweight championship with a 12-round, almost went back to 1978, John, with a 12-round unanimous decision over Robert Easter. This is a fight, John, that actually, I think Easter, with Cunningham as his new trainer, I think he did show improvement. I think Easter looked better than he had the last 3 or 4 fights he was in. He's just not on the level of Mikey Garcia.
Well, Mikey Garcia, in a good way, he is what we thought he was. I think he played this one out just like we expected. Dropped Easter, wasn't quite able to stop him, but looked good the whole way. And he's definitely one of the top fighters. You could even make an argument that he might be the best fighter in boxing. He's certainly up there. I agree Robert Easter made adjustments. I know what he was trying to do with Cunningham, but I didn't end up liking it. I think for him to try to do what he did, to make that adjustment fighting somebody as good as Mikey Garcia, when he had not been fighting in that way, he just, to me, wasn't that much of a threat. And what I'm referring to is, obviously, he'd heard the criticisms that he was a tall guy and he didn't use his height and reach properly.
Yeah,
so he was going to jab and move around.
He had no chance either. He had no chance in this fight either way.
And I'm actually not going to disagree with that because in the 9th round, he tried to fight a little bit like that. He was taking a lot of shots and he had to back off. I guess I would have just given him a slightly better chance that way, but I agree with you that fighting Mikey Garcia wasn't going to make a difference.
Yeah,
but
my
I
whole
think
point on that is this. I think when you look at Robert Easter going forward, if he could continue to maybe mold his style a different way, then maybe we haven't seen the last of him.
No, I agree. If he continues, if this is a start of that and he's going to fight with that way and he can start getting leverage on his right hand, I guess where I was thinking that he would have had his best shot, and I still thought that, even though I do have to agree with you, Mike, that when you saw Easter do it a little bit in the 9th, he was taking a lot of shots. But what I kind of envisioned for his kind of one and only chance was, even though he's a tall, thin guy, still, sometimes when you got a frame that big leaning on you, if he would have fought like he did against Mendez and maybe been leaning on Garcia and really gone with a high volume, it would have been like a war as long as it lasted, but that maybe he would have had a better shot and maybe caught him with something. But he didn't elect to fight that way, so we'll never know. But I do agree. I don't think it would have changed the result. I think the result ends up being the same. But I just don't think you can make an adjustment like that in one fight for a guy as good as Mikey Garcia and think you're going to perfect it enough to win the fight. And that's why I just think he kind of looked, mediocre. Easter, he didn't look terrible, but he certainly didn't look great either.
All right, Jeremiah, what was your take?
Well, I saw it the way you guys saw it. I mean, Garcia he's an excellent fighter. I mean, if you want to teach your kids, the fundamentals of boxing, throw on a tape of Mikey Garcia. I mean, his balance is excellent. His jab is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of his jab. I mean, it does a great job of masking his right hand, which is deadly accurate and, obviously powerful. The left hook is sharp as well. I mean, the guy's just always on balance. He understands the value of feinting, even though he doesn't do it a lot. again, he looks like he's been doing it all his life. I mean, he's the best technician in boxing today. And you got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, he went out there, and even though he was, a big favorite going in, I mean, he clearly beat one of the top 5 lightweights in the world. And now it's what does he do next? I mean, and I know a lot of others want to see him fight Vasil Lomachenko. I mean, Showtime didn't seem to think it was all that important. They even ran a segment after the fight, where they had Errol Spence on, and they're asking Errol Spence about it. I want to see Lomachenko and Garcia. I mean, that will determine a real, linear champion in the division. It's an excellent fight. I mean, they're two of the best fighters, two of the probably the top 5 fighters in the world. They've got to make that, and with Garcia potentially going up to 147 and challenging himself, I'd give him a lot of credit for doing so. I mean, it's a better fight than Errol Spence could get from a lot of these other guys. I mean, I think Mikey Garcia could potentially beat Sean Porter or Dana Garcia, but it's not what I want to see. And I don't think if he happened to win, we'd a lot of us would eat crow, and then you'd really have to crown him something special. If he came through that one. But Vasil Lomachenko and Garcia, that's really what I want to see. And I really hope they make it happen, but it just doesn't look likely.
Yeah, but you got that man crush on him. That's why you want to see it happen. There's really not
who doesn't want to see it, though?
There's not. Well, I can tell you this. As a boxing fan, I will take that, or I will take him against Spence. I'll take either one, because I think that it's great that we actually see a guy who's one of the best fighters in the world that is actually looking to fight other guys that are best fighters in the world. And let's face it, he don't want Bob Arum to make no money off a Lomachenko fight.
No, that's right. What I think.
That's what I think. I mean, it's a promotional thing. So give me Spence Garcia,
Yeah, and I'll take Spence Garcia because, I mean, outside of it being what I think is a very interesting matchup, it also screws Bob Arum, and who could not like that?
Yeah, I mean, Mikey Garcia is out there doing his own thing, and Richard Schaefer has been kind of a part-time promoter for a little while now, and you see the stuff on the Ringstar, social media pages and whatnot. They're helping him sell the fights, but I mean, give the guy credit. I mean, Mikey Garcia, I think it's a little too much crap from a lot of guys because he's always talking in interviews how he wants to do this and how he wants to do that, and it doesn't seem like he has a lot of, like the Miguel Cotto thing where apparently that was offered to him and he didn't take it, and he says he wants to fight this guy and that guy. But I think he's serious with the Errol Spence thing, and though it'd be really unfortunate he'd miss Vasil Lomachenko in what I think is a historic matchup, you'd have to give him credit. And I actually don't think that matchup is that big. I mean, like most people, I think, sure, Errol Spence is too big. Eventually he'd wear him down. But with Errol Spence's defensive flaws and Mikey Garcia being a fantastic jabber and a very good right-hand puncher, of course, 147, he's not gonna carry up that lightweight power, not the stuff he saw against Easter Jr., but he will have some power. And, the fact that the best punch you usually land against a southpaw's right hand I think that is an interesting fight. Again, outside of, maybe Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford, I mean, Mikey Garcia is probably the most interesting fight out there. So, yeah, I mean, as a secondary option, go ahead and get it done. And that's just my take is that, because Garcia is a fantastic boxer and defensively he's responsible. I mean, he doesn't get hit with a lot of clean shots. I mean, it takes volume guys to kind of break that tight shell. And, Spence does have good volume.
Hey,
but
put it like this real quick, Jeremiah. When I look at Errol Spence, I don't see anybody else out there he can fight because of promotional things that's going to challenge him. And I would like to know how good he is. And by fighting a guy like Mikey Garcia, I think we find that out because Mikey Garcia, I think, is worlds above boxing ability-wise anybody that he has even remotely faced so far.
I would agree. I mean, and again, it's the styles matchup. I think, again, Garcia being so technically sharp, he's sharper than Errol Spence. And again, Spence needs to learn move his head a bit better. And, Garcia's riding high right now. I mean, Garcia probably thinks that he's on top of the world. He's been unbeaten. He's won just about every fight that he's had. From featherweight, almost to the classical welterweight class in convincing fashion. I mean, the guy's obviously a stellar fighter. Go ahead and get it done. Spence obviously wants it, and so they'll probably make it happen.
All right, real quick, let's go ahead and look at a couple fights that are coming up this weekend. Jeremiah, we'll start off with you. We got Dimitri Bivol against Isaac Chilemba, and for some reason, this is for a WBA World Lightweight Heavyweight title. I don't know why it's for that, John. Maybe you could explain it to me, especially when you look at he gets stopped by Gvozdyk, gets beaten by Kovalev, gets beaten by Alvarez. I know a couple of those the Alvarez fight was close. But number one, you could tell us how this became a title fight, and then does Chilemba have a chance? Because I think Bivol's going to blast him.
No, Chilemba has no chance here. He was dominated by Kovalev and dropped. Gvozdyk already stopped him. This fight shouldn't be happening. This is a case where you got one good fight that is legitimate premium cable type of a fight in Kovalev and Alvarez, and then you've got Bivol, who extremely impressed me against Barrera. He's better than I thought he was, so I'm ready for him to step it up even farther. He's a threat now, which I thought he would be very good, but I didn't think he'd necessarily be a threat to be the best light heavy in the world in that tough of a division, which is arguably the toughest in boxing. But I think he obviously is that threat now. I think this is about the main events. Wants Kovalev to get enough paydays before he's going to take the Bivol fight. I think that's the plan, but I think that's why Bivol's in this holding pattern, because nobody else is going to want to get in the ring with him, and Kovalev wants to wait to get in the ring with him. But Chilemba's just not acceptable at this point. Shouldn't be on HBO. So Bivol's got an alphabet belt, so it's a title fight. But and he's for real. But this is definitely a step down from the Barrera fight, a significant step down. And Chilemba's not a puncher. He's got no chance here. So this is one of those, with disregard the fact that you say everybody has a chance, when you're talking about reality of a fighter having a chance or not, Chilemba's got no chance.
Yeah,
so this shouldn't be on HBO.
And John, I don't know about you, but I feel dirty we've agreed with each other so much tonight.
It's sick.
Well, it's got to happen once in a while, right?
I've got a knot in my stomach listening to this crap.
All right, one time, John, you're an asshole. Jeremiah, let's see. Do you agree with me and John?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to do here. I mean, Chilemba doesn't deserve the shot. I mean, I'm not even going to talk about the fight because stylistically, obviously, Chilemba's a crafty guy. The thought here is that Chilemba is actually going to give Bivol rounds, that he hasn't had in his young career, which they assume will be good progression and a lead up to the Kovalev fight. So, it makes some sense. But the whole idea of, some, alphabet soup organization, the WBA sanctioning this, I don't really care. Actually, I saw a writer from The Ring yesterday say that the WBA should not be recognized as a major sanctioning body, and I'm thinking to myself, hallelujah, like I'm in the pew and I'm listening to the preacher and I've got my hands up. Like, we need more of that. We need more of these guys from The Ring and other places to say, hey, enough is enough. The bullshit needs to stop. And, this is just one of many examples of bullshit. And, it's just a win-win fight for Bivol. It's just preparation for something bigger. Not much more you can say outside of that.
All right, then we've got Sergey Kovalev against Alvarez. I know I don't think this fight's going to go very long. I think Kovalev's going to blast him within 6 or 7 rounds. I think John will probably disagree with me on this one finally. But when I look at him, John, if you look at his last few fights, he beat an old Pascal, he beat an old Butte, and he had trouble with Pascal's majority decision, a majority decision over Chilemba. When I look at this, the other thing that stands out to me is that Alvarez doesn't have a ton of power. He's 23-0 with 11 knockouts. I don't see how he's going to keep Kovalev off of him.
look out, because I'm going to agree again. I've never been high on Alvarez,
God.
even though
I thought you did like Alvarez.
No. Canelo Alvarez, not Elijah
I asked
Alvarez.
the question to John, but
You got him
Jeremiah
mixed
knew,
up.
Or I asked the question to Jeremiah, but John knew that since he agreed with me, he could just interrupt you, and I wouldn't tell him to not interrupt you. So
I didn't know you were asking Jeremiah. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
Yeah. You made it sound like you were directed it at John, so I wasn't prepared
I said
to.
Jeremiah. And then before that, though, I did say that John was probably going to disagree with me. So
Yeah. See, that's why I thought you redirected.
Okay, that's what threw me off. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
well,
you gotta captain the ship a little better, Mike. But yeah, now
really? You're about to go on mute, and you know what? This show would be over by now if your freaking phone would work. But go ahead.
Freaking phone would work. I'm not on the phone, but yeah,
well, you know what I
like
mean. Your Skype. I'm sorry, you hoity-toity young kid that doesn't know about actual telephones. But go ahead.
Hey man, I know, you put me in front of a rotary phone. I know how to use that thing. Okay, I'm not that young. But no, I mean, like you said, Alvarez just doesn't pose the threat that Bivol or some of these other punchers do. Alvarez just he's not a puncher. So if you're not a puncher, how do you beat Kovalev? I mean, unless you have the boxing skills of Andre Ward.
Yeah, but Ward I think hits a lot harder than Alvarez does.
Yeah, he is. He's a sharper puncher, and not only that, he's quicker. But Alvarez, what's he going to do to keep him off? I mean, I saw the fights with Alvarez and Pascal, and Chilemba is unappealing as that was. Alvarez he's been waiting in the wings for many years to fight Stevenson, but he's got a tougher fight on his hands now, and I see him getting stopped around 6-7 rounds like you. Alvarez, the thing about Kovalev is he's such a hard puncher that a lot of guys, when they feel it early, they just go into defensive mode and they just fight to survive. And the issue that I have with Kovalev sometimes is that he gets a little uninventive with his tactics when he's trying to finish you off, a bit like his last fight, where he'll rely too much on the jab, too much on the right hand. He's really got to learn to crank up that hook, especially to the body. If he integrates that into his offense in this fight, he should have him out of there earlier than that. But yeah, this should be a stoppage win for him.
All right, John, go. Agree with me again.
Yeah, we're going to keep everybody in shock. I have to agree. I think Kovalev might even take him out a little bit earlier. I think it's within the realm of possibility in this one. Yeah, I think with these modern light heavies, and I think it modern matters with them. I've said it before, but it's always worth emphasizing. They don't have to weigh in the day of the fight. These guys are coming in at weights like old heavyweights. When you read about neurologists talk about boxing, when somebody gets over 185 pounds, any human can generate enough force to take out any other human. So you're getting into heavyweight, traditional heavyweight type power. And why that matters with a guy like Alvarez is because he's a little bit underpowered for the way these guys hit in the light heavyweight division today, quite a bit underpowered. So Kovalev, to me, is a guy that's vulnerable to the right hand. But Alvarez is not going to bring that kind of pop to exploit that vulnerability. And I just don't know that he can take what Kovalev's bringing. I was surprised that, Stevenson ended up settling on Badu Jack as his tougher guy, so to speak, to fight, which wasn't a bad choice, which the way it played out. But I think Alvarez, would have been another good choice. I never understood why he kept paying him step-aside money. I think this is a smart move by Kovalev. Alvarez is undefeated. There's some perception he's been avoided with all the step-aside money from Stevenson, but I think this is a guy that these top light heavyweights can take out, and Kovalev certainly being one of them. I think I would agree. I would think within 6, Kovalev should be able to take him out. I think Kovalev is going to get one more stop before the Bivol fight, which is going to be Joe Smith, the way it sounds. And, of course, Joe Smith had a tough time with Sullivan Barrera. But the one thing that Joe Smith will be able to do that Elijah Alvarez can't do is he can crack with the right hand.
Oh, yeah,
Kovalev
and I'll watch
right
that
hand.
fight any day.
So,
we know that's going to be a knockout one way or the other. Probably
right.
One
That's
way.
one that somebody's going to go.
Yeah.
And I would be interested to watch that for an explosion as well. So that's at least something we're going to tune into. I think that we might get that next before we get Kovalev Bivol if he survive Smith. So I think Kovalev wins this one pretty easily Saturday night.
All right, and one thing we learned from this, John, is we shave like a half hour off the show where we agree with each other all the time.
Yeah, I guess if that happens once in a while, maybe every other week, we can go a half hour shorter.
But any final closing comments, John?
Yeah, I think that like as Jeremiah was talking about, I don't understand this criticism of Mikey Garcia for taking on Errol Spence. These are two of the top fighters in boxing. In my opinion, certainly top 10 pound for pound guys. I have nothing against Garcia Lomachenko, but for me, and I like what Jeremiah said, you always have that clarity of a linear lightweight champion. But with that said, with the politics with Top Rank, I just didn't even see it as a realistic possibility. So PBC is not afraid to put their guys in together, and I see no reason to criticize Spence Garcia. I think the winner of that fight's Fighter of the Year for 2018. And look at all the guys that, made the move up, Roberto Duran, Henry Armstrong, Shane Mosley, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. Why are we criticizing, we're not, but why in God's name are some people who are supposed to know what they're talking about? And some of these people are violently criticizing Mikey Garcia for taking the fight. I could see, maybe even though it was because of promotional issues, you criticize Mikey Garcia because he was off for 2.5 years. But I see no reason to criticize what this guy's done since he's been back. There was no reason to criticize what he'd done before he took the hiatus. So the guy's a good role model for modern boxing. His technique's perfect, like Jeremiah was saying. Mike, I know you like him a lot. I don't get the criticism at all, even if he were to lose. I agree with, what Mike was saying, Jeremiah saying. Just what Garcia brings to the table is still going to be a test for Errol Spence just because of how good he is. If he loses, it's not necessarily going to be because of the weight. It might be, it might not be, but let the fight play out. Let's see what happens in the ring. Certainly no reason to criticize that fight. I don't think anybody who's criticizing it's really on solid ground.
Yeah, it's what great fighters used to do in the past. Jose Napoli's didn't try to drop down to lightweight. He moved up to middleweight to fight Carlos Monzon. And nobody said, well, he's afraid of, Roberto Duran, whoever the lightweight champion is at the time. I mean, he moved up to fight Carlos Monzon. And the thing is this, I don't know if other people feel this way, but Napoli's in his reign, there weren't a lot of great fighters for him to fight. So I look at Napoli's probably in a much better light just because he took the chance to fight a Carlos Monzon.
Oh, yeah, that showed he was great. I mean, he was the linear welterweight champion, a traditional division, going against the linear middleweight champion, traditional division. And, hey, he went out in 7 rounds. He dared. He was a great fighter.
That was a competitive fight for the first 3 or 4 rounds, too. It was just the size was too much.
But no reason to criticize him for taking the shot. No. And we didn't hear any fans talking insanity back in those days about, well, there's this new 154-pound division that has guys like Oscar Alvarado fighting. He needs to fight Alvarado. He needs to take on, Alvarado or maybe fight for that new alphabet belt first. People did not talk about such insane things back 40 years ago like that. So,
all right.
I don't see any reason to criticize Garcia.
Jeremiah, any closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, no, I just wanted to piggyback off what John is saying about the criticism for Garcia. Is, it shouldn't the criticism for him fighting Spence shouldn't be levied that hard, but there still is something about Garcia that I dislike. I mean, and I think is justified in the fact that he just hasn't beaten the best in any division that he's really gone against. I mean, unless you think Lipinets was number 2 at 140, and I can accept that, but The thing about it, he just hasn't become the champion in any one division. And, part of that isn't his fault. Part of it is the saturation of titles and weight divisions, et cetera, et cetera. But, potentially, if we only had one division or one champion per division, Mikey Garcia could very well be the a former featherweight champion, a former lightweight champion, and he's challenging what might be in an ideal world the welterweight champion of the world, or very close to it, and that would be.
But real quick,
yes.
Jeremiah, think of this: Henry Armstrong drew for the middleweight title too. I mean, could you imagine Mikey Garcia fighting for the middleweight championship? I can't, but I think that's what drives us nuts when people talk about, this guy's a 12-time champion or 11-time champion. Henry Armstrong would have done exactly what Mikey Garcia had done if Garcia beat Spence, and then if Garcia goes up and fights a draw with Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah, I understand there. The Henry Armstrong Ceferino Garcia thing is a little bit overplayed because Garcia wasn't actually considered the middleweight champion of the world.
Fighting any middleweight ranked in the top 10.
Right. I mean, if he fought, and the thing is more of that could happen if they started imposing weight limits on guys. I mean, you can't expect it nowadays because Mikey Garcia, when he fought a middleweight, he'd be essentially fighting a light heavyweight or a cruiserweight come fight night. But if you impose some sort of weight limits or went back to the same day weigh-ins, you could get stuff like this, and that's why I don't understand why people don't want to see it. Bring back the old stuff so we could see potential greatness like this. And of course, the Alphabet Soup organizations, they help curb this kind of holding belts in multiple divisions because they squashed that idea. They said you can't do it anymore, and that's why you saw some people complain about Floyd Mayweather getting preferential treatment when he held the title at 147 and 154. Which I didn't mind at all. I think you should be allowed to hold multiple titles in multiple divisions so long as you plan on defending them. But that's the thing is potentially you could have a guy, and I'm not saying as great as Henry Armstrong. Of course, Garcia could never be that good just because he didn't fight as many opponents and whatnot. But we could be talking about, in an ideal world, we could be talking about a guy who's a former featherweight champion, lightweight champion, and he's fighting, bona fide dyed in the wool top rung welterweight. I mean, imagine the historical prospect of that. I mean, it would be fantastic. But unfortunately, we don't quite have something like that. But it's still great. And honestly, I'd still prefer him to fight Lomachenko for the lightweight championship of the world. But this is ambition. We should want more of this. We should expect this more of guys. So kudos to Garcia, and I wish him luck in the fight. I mean, it's a big jump, and not many guys are doing it.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up for this week. I want to remind everybody you can hear me and Steve Risley every Monday through Friday at noon Eastern Time. If you want to hear today's show, we did a preview of the AFC. Tomorrow we'll preview the NFC. We'll give you previews, predictions with Lucas Weiss on which teams win the division, who goes to the Super Bowl, so make sure you check us out for that. You can hear all of our shows now on Spotify and, of course, as always, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.